Howdy Heroes Hearth, this is Kyle Fergusson. Today I get to sit down again with SlugHunter, Wild Heart Esports, playing Yrel. I thought you were a healer. Good to have you back.
I was recently a healer, but that had to change.
Adapt, one might say.
Yeah.
Well, you've been quite busy making all kinds of different plays on lots of different heroes, but here we're going to be talking about Yrel. Someone who I don't get to see much anymore, someone I've certainly loved a lot, a very busy, dynamic, but some call clunky hero. How did Yrel end up happening in this Tomb of the Spider Queen?
I can't remember when we picked it, but looking at draft, we likely picked it fairly early. It's generally something I think you can pick early, even though some people consider there to be some things that counter her. I think in general you can play around them well enough that she's just a strong enough character that she's pickable in most games.
Now, it is worth noting as we get started here, there is a error in the replay file. It'll never show us where you're angling your Avenging Wrath. So at home,
yeah.
If you're watching, you'll see a big circle in a completely different direction than what SlugHunter's about to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned right before we started going that Yrel doesn't have as many strong counters as people might believe.
Yeah, I think in general, you can play around them. I know some people consider Lucio a counter, but I think you can play around his boop and, you know, you don't have to always E in for stuff the way I play her. I'm mostly using my E for just mobility, if anything, and less for damage, depending on, or not necessarily just like jumping in, but you can jump around, you can kind of find different angles. But you can play around where the Lucio is instead of playing on top of him.
Is that more extreme with something like a Uther main tank?
It can be. I'd say Uther is a bit more annoying because if you're channeling anything, he can just walk up and boop you, or not boop you, but stun you.
Yeah.
And hit you with his hammer. It's annoying, but again, it's still something you can play around to some degree. If he's burning his stun on you, that means he's not burning his stun on someone else on your team. And as Yrel, you're generally fine to take like some damage.
That's always the tough thing about bruisers is you are absorbing a stun that would kill a Vala, for instance. But now, if so many nowadays, I guess you'd say the design of bruisers is so spell dependent, as well as the tanks, that getting stunned is very dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. I think Yrel's fairly survivable in that scenario. She has a lot of tools to help her with that. And so I think she's generally safer to take some of the CC from the enemy team, especially if you have other members on your team that can help you with that.
So here you're doing a double rotate, and on Tomb of the Spider Queen, it's a pretty short way to go. Some of our other, famous double rotators of mid-leagues love their Zools, but of course we have things like Leoric. Where does she kind of stack up into that?
She's not the fastest, but she has generally good wave clear. It generally takes, her wave clear, I'd say, takes about 6 seconds because you're going to do about 2 E's on the wave generally. So you started off with an E, auto once, DQ, auto the backline minions a few times, and then E the whole wave again. Both times you E, you should be trying to E the whole wave, and that will generally clear the wave. It gets better and quicker as you level up, but in general, her wave clear is fairly good.
And what you're doing here is something that I had to learn when playing Yrel. It's a jump that doesn't matter how charged it is, because it always deals full damage.
Yeah.
And then you're going straight into a divine purpose. You're empowered for a big vindication, and that deals more damage being fully charged.
Yes.
Is there any sort of auto attack dance you're doing with that?
It's mainly just autoing the backline minions generally so that the second E will kill them. Because the frontline minions will just get themselves low enough by being hit generally. So it's not really, you're not concerned with autoing them. So if you watch, I'm generally just only autoing the backline minions.
And there's no righteous hammers at all in lane clear.
There's almost no point to doing it. It's not very high damage, and it's generally a waste of mana, if anything.
65 mana. Everything's 65 mana. That's expensive.
Yeah.
So you got some stuff coming online here. We've seen you doing some juggling with your level 1 talent. Let's talk about that. Dauntless. Casting a basic ability for Yrel grants 35 physical armor, but I missed the days of 50, of course. Are you doing anything in particular to keep this up longer, or is just your natural rotation doing that for you?
I would say it's more the natural rotation, especially when wave clearing. I'm not really concerned about it. I'm not taking a huge amount of damage during the early game, so it's mostly like I'm just hitting waves. So when it's up is more to do with just how I'm hitting the wave. In team fights, maybe I will, if I don't have D up but I need the armor for something, I can like quickly use like a Q or a W just to get the armor. But for the most part, it just kind of naturally works with her kit.
Now you're doing something, let's skip ahead here. You're doing some righteous momentum there, getting your hammer up for increased movement speed. Now, this is what you're talking about your playstyle not being as CC ruined, because you're not going Holy Avenger.
Yes. Because I can just kind of run around with my hammer out at, close to mount speed, it generally means that I don't care about something like a Lucio boop. The Uther hammer is still effective, but I'm generally also faster than the Uther if they're dismounted, so it's still harder to hit. It's harder to hit skill shots on me when I'm running around with it. And it also gives a base movement speed buff, even when you're not channeling your W. Which is actually very effective just for being able to move in fights.
Yeah, because normally you're kind of caught in the animation, but that gets rid of the slowed, doubles it to 10%, and so you can use this for kind of a mountless pursue?
It doubles it to, well, it quadruples it to 20% buff.
Oh, quadruple.
Actually,
oh,
yes.
Okay, yes, that's what you mean by mount speed. All right.
Yeah, so you're at 120% speed. So it's close to mount speed. It's not quite. So like I generally won't use it too much to rotate. I'll still just mount up. But it's very effective for being able to channel your hammer while on your way to something so that you don't have to use your D for it. You can use your D for something else. So if you want to hammer and then DE out, or maybe even DE in or DQ, you don't have to burn. A lot of times if I don't have this talent, I would have to E in a lot of scenarios to find the hammers I'm looking for. And then I have 2 abilities gone and have to D my W.
So the empowered W now deals a stun rather than just knocking away. It's a 0.75 stun, which is pretty long in Heroes of the Storm, as our stuns are all pretty tame. So, okay, yeah, so in the different, more Mario mode playstyle where you want to do the jump reset at 7, that is a charge up, hope they're still in range, land it, go into a D, into another E, whereas this is allowing you to go in and then have kind of a level of dynamic play since you didn't engage using your D in that combo.
Yeah, I kind of have a lot of choice in what to do afterwards. I can, just either try to get out, go back in, stay where I am, and just try to zone using my body.
And that's exactly what we saw in that previous fight. The team basically collapsed onto Blaze. You got Vala. Sure, she's multi-shot, but still just burning down that Blaze. And you basically played with the whole enemy team.
Yeah. That's generally, a lot of the time, that's kind of my job on Yrel, is to annoy their backline, so that if they commit too many resources forward, I can generally, I can take someone out of the fight or even, take them out. And, I mean, sometimes it also can depend on comp. So our tank here is a Stitches, who's not really going to be in their backline at all, but let's say I had, like, a Muradin or something, I could play more with my backline, and then Mura could go in.
What's kind of the strategy with Hand of Freedom here? There's definitely slows. You got Blaze. No big roots to dodge, like something obvious like that Zool again.
So the removal of it, like the removal of slows and roots, is a nice part of the talent. I think that the on-demand move speed you can give to anyone on your team is huge. I think move speed's just really good in general. And even giving it to yourself, it helps against ganks. It helps chase down kills. And in general, you know, if my Stitch is gorgeous, someone we don't have a portal, I can just give him 30% move speed. He's got mount speed, sprinting away. If my Val's in trouble, I can give her move speed. Same thing with my Stukov, who's generally immobile.
Interesting. 30-second cooldown. So should you use it here? Like, is it something that should be used every single chance you have just to make full effectiveness of the talent, or do you like to kind of save it for situations and don't worry about 30 seconds?
I'm not really worried about the cooldown. I'm not thinking like, oh, I have to get value out of it every time it's up. It's just like, you know, this looks like a fine time to use it. The cooldown does allow you to use it, you know, very often and not worry about misusing it. You can kind of just use it whenever you think is a good moment to, and if it turns out to not be the best time to use it, it's not the end of the world. Just a 30-second cooldown.
We just saw the Ardent Defender use. Surround Yrel in a barrier for 3 seconds, absorbing all damage taken and healing her for 50% of the damage received. Any philosophies on getting this one out effectively? 120-second cooldown.
Yeah, I generally... So, I think some of the strength of this ult is just the threat of it. It's harder to try to all-in a Yrel knowing that she has it up. And also, if they try to all-in me, I'm perfectly fine. I'll just heal up from it. If they throw a ball lightning on me, my only thing this game is just making sure I don't get wailing arrowed before I get it off.
With like Divine Shield for Uther, we see a lot of kind of philosophy of using it while at higher health, dodging things, and then coming out of it with a decent amount of health. Do you try to go low with this, like of the Mal'Ganis switcheroo kind of dark conversion, or?
Not necessarily too low. It's just whenever I think that a bunch of damage is going to, you know, be used on me, or if it's going to allow me to go in without fear of dying, and allow me to just create a lot of pressure.
And we got Aldor Peacekeeper. Hitting enemy heroes with Vindication at maximum charge deals 40% less damage for 3 seconds, or causes them to deal that less damage. I almost always see Velen's Chosen. How does this one work without, you know, kind of going a full build like Loud of Calibor? I find when Yrels want to do Peacekeeper, they end up like really committing the whole build to it.
I think in general, because I can easily get to their backline with my just running around with my W or jumping in, I think it's just really strong. You know, it takes off a little less than half their damage. So the way, especially I like to play Yrel and the offlane role in general, is almost closer to a second support, where I'm just trying to peel and create space for my team to kind of do their thing. And I think Peacekeeper does a really good job of that. I do think that Light of Kerabor is a really good talent when Dauntless gets less value. I definitely take it sometimes if I don't think I'm going to get much value out of the physical armor. And it does go really well with Aldor Peacekeeper, but I've never really had an issue getting Aldor Peacekeeper onto people. And especially, it works very well with the W7 because I don't have to E in. So I can just, you know, run to their backline, and there's no issue with me doing a DQ. I'm not worried about, you know, oh, I can't stun someone, because generally, you know, it's easy enough for me to get in position to stun someone.
Because you're using that W for the movement speed, and then if you were to stick around, you could then quickly hit them with the Divine Purpose into Vindication.
Yes. Or I could Divine Purpose, not even the same person. It's, you know, I could Righteous Hammer their tank in and walk to their backline and, you know, Divine Purpose Vindication them. So their tank's in there and they can't respond because they're doing basically half damage.
It's amazing how much hurting you're doing with Righteous Hammer. Now, so at 16, you grabbed yourself the Templar's Verdict, a huge giant killer, reduces armor of the enemy hero hit by 20, and they take 7% of their total max health as damage. Is the enemy now respecting that hammer? Or are they afraid to be stunned? Like, they are letting you just absolutely bully them.
I don't know if they're necessarily, like, you know, afraid of it, but it's definitely something to look out for, especially post 16. Because if you do get stunned, I mean, it's a lot of damage now, and then the Vuln is pretty big and just allows you to burn anyone down pretty quickly.
Well, and she's not a slouch on autos either. I mean, you take away that armor, you're hitting for 314 plus the reduction.
Yeah, her autos are definitely very, very strong and a very important part of her kit. And it definitely is amplified by the Templar's verdict.
So you got the Wailing Arrow to be concerned about at the moment. Other than that, has this game evolved to have any other fears for Yrel?
I mean, I could get potentially CC chained by Blaze and Tehran, but I should generally be playing in a way where that'd be... it should be obvious enough that Blaze is going to try to go for me that I shouldn't be able to get hit. In general, I'm also fast enough to just run out of Tyrande stuns if she tries to raw stun me. And because Joe's Falling Sword, I'm not too scared of any of her engages either, because they're very telegraphed. So in general, I'm not too scared of this game. I also have a Medivh, so that gives me more freedom with, you know, how I can use my body.
This is wild seeing just how different your Righteous Hammer kind of play style has let you be. Just it's not that you've increased your survivability while that hammer is out. Granted, you know, we're dealing with a level lead at this point, but even throughout the whole game, people really respected Yrel running straight towards them.
Yeah, they didn't have too much to deal with me this game, so I kind of got to do whatever I wanted. You know, within reason, obviously.
Are there any other talents that you feel are full wiggle? Like you could easily move into this build, and kind of what are the cores of matching your playstyle?
Personally, I do think, as you mentioned earlier, Velen's Chosen at 13 is a very good talent. It's not necessarily my playstyle, but if there's a lot of percentage damage on the enemy team, which can't be reduced, I think it's something that I would move into more often than not. And I think outside of that, there's not really too much else I change in the build. The 20, maybe I could, if they have nothing that I have to Unstoppable, I could go into Word of Glory, which isn't bad. But I think in general, the Unstoppable is just very strong.
I know that in most tournaments, I'm not sure if CCL, Bubble Hearth is banned. Is that true here?
I am not aware. I've never considered the talent, so
okay. As something that is very popular in pick rate for like a Storm League situation, why not Bubble Hearth?
I just think in general, if I'm playing my characters correctly, I shouldn't be in a position where I have to Bubble Hearth. The only time I can really think that I would want to have that is if I'm afraid of the enemy trying to backdoor and having someone to stall me. So like, I guess if I really needed to back for some reason and the enemy's trying to stall me, it would be nice to have. But in that situation, I should probably be in a better position anyway. Basically, anytime I would use Bubble Hearth, I probably did something wrong.
Damn. No, that's great advice. And yeah, that extreme situation would be like you getting 20 while Asmodan goes your core and you're stuck on Infernal Shrines Pit or something bizarre like that, and you have to make that immediate choice. So Word of Glory then is actually worth considering. I've always seen Seraphim.
Yeah, in general, pretty much every game there's going to be some reason to go Seraphim. And it's a low cooldown self-unstoppable for 2 seconds, which is just very strong. But I don't think Word of Glory is necessarily a bad talent. It's just that Seraphim's very strong.
So the majority of people let Yrel's release just kind of pass them by. Heroes were really chugging at that time. There was a lot of releases. I know Blaze was around that time too. They became kind of the big matchup. She got her mana costs increased, and everyone just completely dismissed her as clunky. But here in this replay, we saw nothing of the sort. How do you go from clunk Yrel to proficient? What would be your first step?
I never found the character incredibly clunky. I've technically not played her a huge amount, but I've never really struggled with her. Her kits generally made sense to me. I guess when it first came out, it did feel weird, but I think just practicing with it and getting used to how to use each ability, you'll kind of get into a rhythm with it and it won't really feel clunky. I think the only time it really feels clunky is if the enemy's constantly interrupting your channels.
In which case, this playstyle can help because you still have all your buttons available.
Yes, you do.
Awesome. This was a real treat. I love playing Yrel. I'm real happy to see something that's not so dependent on the draft too, to get more Yrels out there. Everyone watching, be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell here at Heroes Hearth for more Learn to Play Here's the Storm action, as well as CCL Season 3, where you can catch Wildheart SlugHunter doing his thing. Thanks for watching, everybody.